All right. Good morning, everybody. Super excited to introduce our guest, Mr. John Barkett. We're going to let him introduce himself in a moment, but just want to let you know how big this is for everyone who may have suffered flood losses from Hurricanes Helene and Milton. Obviously, a really pressing issue in Southwest Florida. And here in Florida, although we often suffer these catastrophic hurricane losses, it kind of just started where we're having this tremendous flood component. So John has been so kind to agree to share some time with us. As usual, I'm going to just try to ask those good questions that people have been asking me, and we're going to let John cook for you guys. So without further ado, John, would you take a moment to introduce yourself, please?
Certainly. Good morning, everybody. John Barkett. My firm is Property Valuation Specialist here in downtown St. Pete, Florida. This will be this July our 25th year serving the community with high quality valuation for both residential and commercial. Dan, if you don't mind, can you share the FEMA tag?
This one?
Part of this is my intro. The house that you see, that's our website. The home that you see in the picture in the upper right-hand corner is actually my personal home in St. Pete Beach. So, a lot of us in the community we're living this, as not just homeowners and business owners and leaders in the community. So, I feel this is great. This is, I literally was on a webinar yesterday with Pinellas County Property Appraiser, and I was saying, it's just as cathartic for us to put the right information out there and help relieve whatever anxiety we can and help people navigate this process. So you hear a lot about FEMA 50% rule. But I'm going to back up for a second. So in addition to being here for 25 years, I'm a member of the Appraisal Institute. I hold a master's degree from New York University in real estate valuation and analysis, and I've got an amazing team of certified general appraisers that are licensed to appraise anything, basically, here in the state of Florida. And they have also been basically cross-trained as floodplain administrators. So, Dan, if you don't mind going to the next PDF there. So our piece, I explain it, and our piece interacts with this whole FEMA process in a bunch of different ways. Again, like I said, that's my home. The triple deck chairs you see on the right side are from the trade winds, which floated up on our property. But basically, I describe our piece of this as somewhat agnostic in that what we are providing to the community is a high quality, low cost, actual cash value appraisal, which is what is required, from the insurance perspective, FEMA perspective, in order to pull a permit. And what that is we're providing an appraisal that can be relied on by your jurisdiction or municipality, but it's also co-certified to any building official and the floodplain administrator, so they have the ability to rely on that document. That being said, you're hearing a lot right now about substantial damage assessments, and where a lot of this came from is, and you can go to the next slide if you don't mind, on this particular PDF, Dan, if you could just scroll down.
Oh, great. Yep.
So this photo was taken in May of 2023, I believe. Yeah. And I went down to Fort Myers and Fort Myers Beach, along with a contingency from Pinellas County, City of St. Petersburg, mayor, administration, building officials, first responders. And we went down there to speak with their building officials, their mayors, their first responders, to find out what it is that they feel they did well, what they feel they got blindsided by in the process, and what could they do better. And
John, if I can interject here, I think
Yeah.
It's so cool and it's so special. Obviously, it's unfortunate, and I don't mean anything positive about it, but that you're in this community, right? So you suffered alongside these people, And this
Yeah.
is the first time, although I have a nice relationship with you, this is the first time I've seen this particular reference here where you were actually in this community. You were down learning the lessons from Fort Myers Beach. And, those who follow me, I've done a lot of work in Fort Myers Beach, mainly the windstorm stuff, not so much the flood stuff. But I mean, it was post apocalyptic there. And some of the thoughts and emotions that I had going through that community, I was like, this is a generational tragedy. Nothing like this could ever, I mean, so beyond belief. And then sure enough, we turn around and, very shortly after, we've got other communities very close by, suffering this same, tragic, catastrophic storm surge and flooding issues. So I just think it's, so great that you've got this unique perspective where you were like in the before and you saw this other community come through. And now, you're helping rebuild and it happens to be your own community, but you've got this really unique perspective. So I just think that's, so cool and important.
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it was eye-opening. The community development director for Fort Myers Beach, because we started in Fort Myers and then worked our way to Fort Myers Beach and Bonita Springs, actually has roots in St. Pete Beach. And she's quoted in this article in the Tampa Bay Times, but the perspective from, the eye-opening experience for all of us, and then the takeaway for us was, from a resiliency, sustainability, how can we as business leaders, business owners, community members learn from this? And for me personally, the takeaway was, to have our formats tight to current FEMA code, to have my appraisers basically cross-trained as floodplain administrators, so that in the event of a catastrophe, we could pivot and quickly, flip the switch to help the community. And that was the biggest takeaway for us as far as how can we help.
Sure. And John, and for people who aren't in this industry, I've been doing this for well over a decade and thousands of claims, hundreds of millions of dollars recovered, flood, wind, fire, loss, you name it. We've helped out in the insurance arena. One of the biggest problems that we face, and I'm dealing with it right now, is finding good, reliable experts. And so what you just said there might be something that people watching who aren't in this industry are like, oh yeah, of course, he saw the opportunity and whatever. It's like, no, like that does not happen. I've got commercial loss properties that we're still putting together our proof of losses and our numbers because the experts are telling me they're so backed up. They can't get the people out and can't get the quality reports to us, that they want. And that's coming from a guy who's well connected in the industry. I know all the people you want to know. So, what you've done there and kind of the timing of that has been really cool that you guys are in the position to help.
I think and that's the retrospective, that's the current, and then, there's the future, right? Like we can't put our heads in the sand and say that, I would like to think this is a once in 100-year event, but, I'm already working with, my counterpart, Mike Twitty, who's an MAI, and our property appraiser, or, head of building department for the county. We're already like interacting, consistently, and our intent is that, we will all reconvene and have a similar session to what we did in Fort Myers as a community and say, okay, now what can we do? Whether it's on the valuation side, on the substantial damage side, who do they use for third-party vendors in the future to streamline this process? Because, I'd say 30% of our webinar yesterday had to do with mental health. I mean, this is post-traumatic stress. I'd say 80% of the people that have never pulled a permit before, let alone been forced into a field posture to go through this process and have to worry about, paying a mortgage and rent and not knowing when they can get back into their home. So, it's quite an ordeal, and everybody's kind of pivoting. I mean, here in Pinellas County, as an example, our property appraiser has been great at updating, putting out timely information, making himself available tweaking his process. He created a whole pre-storm building value reconsideration application, which within 2 weeks, if you feel that there's something just glaringly wrong and you are comfortable with submitting photos, giving proof of what was there, within 2 weeks, you can get that value adjusted, which is the value that's on the books. And I guess I'm getting a little ahead of myself in the process, but
Sure.
it's nice to know that there's also, it's not just retrospective and hey, here we are, but there's forward thinking here for resiliency in the future of how can we do it better.
That's terrific. And I love that for your community. And I love that for Florida communities in general, where we're taking this big problem and obviously not once in 100-year issue. This is once in 2 years or 3 years at this point or whatever. So, certainly appreciate that. And that's a really high level. That's like the big picture stuff. You're working with the government. Let's dive into, I know majority of the people who follow me here are either restoration professionals, or we're seeing a ton of homeowners, people who are looking at this as a resource. I joked with you as I joke with everyone, and kind of like, I approach this like a useful idiot, right? I happen to be a lawyer and I do know more than I let on sometimes. But in terms of, these live shows, what I want to do is try to put myself in the shoes of that individual. And I want to ask the expert, who is you, not me, the expert, the kind of questions that they would want. So let me, we just saw the big picture. Let's get really deep in there. And if, you're a homeowner in St. Pete Beach, what are kind of the brief steps that you have to, and hopefully by now they've, undertaken a lot of this, but let's give people a kind of a frame of reference, the mental model, the lattice work of how this process works. What's the general process? And then we'll jump into where you guys can come into play.
Sure thing. So again, this is jurisdictional by jurisdictional. Every jurisdiction / municipality has negotiated their own deal per se with NFIP and FEMA. So they have their own nuances and ordinances. So you may hear 49% rule versus 50% rule. You may hear 1 year look back, 5 year look back. We have one beach community here that has a 10-year look back period, which means cumulatively permits that have been pulled face value, for lack of a better term, of every single building permit for the last 10 years gets added up, and that erodes what you can do for work. And when I talk about what you can do for work, the typical homeowner is paralyzed in this process, and they're looking at everything in kind of a linear pattern. Like, I need to do this before I can do this. And that's not my advice. I mean, I am personally onboarding every single appraisal client. And the reason I'm hoarse is I'm probably spending just about 35 to 40 minutes per call, walking them through the entire process, not just the valuation process and where we fit. Because what we're doing is we are providing a high quality actual cash value appraisal, which is the depreciated value of the asset, in this case on September 25th, the day before home move.
And let me jump in there too, because we use some terminology that, us as professionals may know. But when we talk about ACV, we're talking about the actual cash value. And when you talk about depreciation, what we're saying, let me give the simplest example we give on a somewhat easy to understand situation. You've got a shingle roof that's supposed to have a usable life of 30 years. If that roof is 15 years old, it is now depreciated half of its usable life. So if to replace that roof would be $30,000, the actual cash value depreciated would be half of that, $15,000. And why is that important specific to flood?
Well, that's your trigger for flood is if you are in a floodplain. And again, I don't want you to think we just do these appraisals post catastrophe. We perform these appraisals all year round and have for well over a decade. Anytime you are in a floodplain and you are doing substantial improvement on a property, you have to go through a very similar process. Okay. You cannot improve your property more than 50% or 49%, again, depending on the jurisdiction, of the depreciated value of the improvements. That is exclusive of land, site improvements, and a couple of other ancillary items. So, what's happening is, again, all the jurisdictions have made their deals, and people are kind of waiting. They hear about a substantial damage determination. And what has happened here and throughout the state is that predominantly a third party group named Tidal Basin has been hired to go out and estimate costs, but they're not going inside of houses. You know, it's like tape measure on the exterior to see water line. And then what they're doing is they're taking that and they're running it through basically a Swift estimator costing service. And they're taking stale information from the county property appraiser and they're running it through the paces and saying, okay, if you got 30 inches of water, you need a 48-inch FEMA cut, meaning you've got to cut 4 feet of your drywall out. So it's your electrical, your cabinets, all your fixtures, because we're doing a fixture count based on the county property appraiser. They're coming up with a number. And then they are comparing that number to a number that the county property appraiser is holding on their books. And now, I'm not speaking out of turn when I say that the property appraiser is the first to admit, I don't care if it's Pinellas County or any county in the state of Florida, that their depreciated values are stale, because that's not their role. The role of the property appraiser is to accurately peg market value through the use of mass appraisal, which has no bearing on cost. That's all sales data. And it's for, ad valorem tax collection purposes, and they do a really good job. What they don't do is monitor every single permit, nor, since homeowners have the right to do work on their own homes, nor do they know that
they don't have to report
it. Or you put in new flooring, or you put in ground molding, unless it's something substantial. Or they may just have not picked it up. So, they're a proponent of hire a private property appraiser. The flawed part of the system, as it's been adopted now post Ian, is that a lot of people feel like we are suffering the sins of what happened in Lee County, in that, they did not do a good job of determining who was damaged, who took on water. And therefore, when FEMA went out and did their audit 2 years down the road, they came up with, in a sampling, I think a sampling about 12 or 1,500 homes, 600 people didn't pull a permit that they know got water. So what's happened now is, and it's unfortunate, because here's this anxiety thing that we're talking about. So you've got homeowners that are getting letters that basically state, you've been determined to be substantially damaged. Here are your options. Tear down your home, lift your home outside of the floodplain, pick up your home and move it, mitigate outside of a floodplain, or, and now in some jurisdictions, they're not even giving you another option. Or your other option is to do what is typically done in sunny days when you're building in a floodplain, and that is to fill out a substantial improvement, substantial damage packet, which you're going to hear referred to as the FEMA packet, although they don't want us to call it that. And then door number two, your only other tool in your toolbox is either, number one, you're going to rely on the stale data from the county property appraiser, or you're going to hire a private licensed professional like myself and my firm. And that's really it. So for me, when I'm talking to clients, whether it's on the, I've got a lot of, we do this on the commercial side as well. I'd say 20% of the calls that I'm doing, even though I'm staying on and walking them through the process, 20% of them, if I'm looking at it, I'm going to say, I don't think you're, in jeopardy right now and rubbing up on 49 or 50%. You don't need me right now. Now, you can always hire me after the fact, but if I feel that you're not necessarily in jeopardy, I haven't been in business for a quarter of a century by charging people for what they don't need. And we all move on, but there's more nuances to the process that we're explaining to them, because just like people have a permit in a lot of instances, I'd say 75% of the people have debt. Well, if you have debt and you have an insurance policy, right? So if you have insurance and you have debt, even if you negotiate with your insurance adjuster, your inside adjuster, desk reviewer, you come to terms. Well, guess what? The checks come, but they don't just come to you. They come to you and your insurance company. And then you sign them off and they go to your insurance company. And then you basically have another part-time job, because now you basically have to be like a mini GC, and you have to get waivers of lien, conditional waivers, unconditional waivers. The more information that I can give people to understand the process, the better, because it takes away the unknown, and they're not continuing to get, basically, sideswiped in the process. And then there's a substantial improvement, substantial damage packet. A lot of people are still, like where we are in the process right now, Dan, for Southwest Florida here, from our impact, I could pretty much go municipality by municipality. The city of St. Petersburg, who's had 3 to 4 flood events in the last 2 years, some of them like sunny day flood events from rain. They have processed, as of Tuesday morning, 5,200 permits they've issued. Unincorporated Pinellas County has only issued 1,700 permits. St. Pete Beach has probably issued about 250 permits. And it goes on and on. So, where we fit in the process, there's not a lot of people that filled out and submitted their substantial improvement, substantial damage packet in advance, because they were all waiting and thinking, well, I should wait and see if I'm substantially damaged. And what I want to tell everybody right now is, don't wait. If you took on water, they know you took on water. They also have access to basically all the reports from NFIP and FEMA. And this isn't to scare you and say they know what you are getting paid out, because that's not true. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Okay. That's not the information that they get, nor could they ever use it, because they don't know what you have in contents. You're not forced to replace what you were covered for. So I don't want you to be nervous that what your contractor fills out, or what you as a contractor fill out, is going to be cross-checked against that loss report. What they see, though, is that there was a loss caused by water or caused by wind, whichever one it is, or both, because we had 2 catastrophes within 14 days. And if you know that is the case, don't wait to hire a good general contractor who has worked in your municipality and understands how to fill these out, because these are filled out, like I said, it's not just post-catastrophe. These are filled out during sunny times as well. And the quicker you get in the queue, the quicker you're going to get a permit. Now, you can alter, add information as you go. This is a living, breathing document.
That's really good. That's really good to know.
You do not need to submit a private appraisal. You could submit your substantial improvement packet, which is basically either yours as an owner builder if it's residential, or if it's commercial, or you choose to hire a general contractor for residential. Basically, all it is a packet that says, it's a very simple, streamlined process, and I'll typically walk my clients through it because it helps answer all the questions, and then they get it. But the very first part is a simple sign off. It's basic information on your property, and it basically says, I'm either going to rely on the county property appraiser's depreciated value of my improvements, or I hired a private appraiser and I'm submitting it with this application. Doesn't mean you have to do it. And then the second part is basically a chart, which is costing. Now, each municipality is a little different in how they've negotiated. Some make you include demolition and tear out, some don't. Some make you include paint, some don't. But it's very simple and laid out. Your municipality has a substantial improvement packet that you can downline or download. And it's either filled out by you as the homeowner or the GC, and it is cost of materials, cost of labor, total. And at the end of the day, if you fill it out as the owner builder, there's a 1-page affidavit that you sign and notarize as the owner builder affidavit. If you're hiring a GC, tear that page up, go to the next page, the general contractor signs it. I'm a numbers geek, I'm an analyst by trade, so I'm going to give you some more stats. And this is just because we all.
John, before we dive into that, so, one of the things that we see on the, even more simplistic property damage side is people are just afraid of paperwork, and they're like, oh, it's too complex, I could never understand it. And they don't even look. And it's like, what it sounds like what you're telling me is, this is documents are made by your municipality. So Google search your municipality, and what keyword would you recommend?
Substantial improvement packet, FEMA, and the name of your municipality, it will come up at the top of your search.
Perfect.
Great point.
So find that, click on it, And before you get overwhelmed, set aside, grab a nice cup of coffee, like our man John is there, set aside 5 quiet minutes, print the thing out if you need to, or put it on a PDF, shut down your other tabs, turn off your phone, spend 5 minutes looking at it, man. This is your home. It's worth that time investment. And it still may be more than you can undertake. And that's okay. And then you have those other resources. But for a lot of people, and like you said, John, a lot of the questions that we get are really so simple that my first question would be like, did you look at the question? Like, did you even look? And they're like, no, it's scary. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, and again, I know it's tough and I know the emotional impact, so I'm not making light of any of that, but it's like, the fear, you can get through some of that fear by seeing what the beast is, right? And not imagining this huge package. Right. What you just explained is like, that's not something that should be overwhelming to somebody. And then you see it in writing, like it's 3 pages, including the affidavit,
right.
Like
informational and affidavits. That's correct. The stat I was gonna tell you, and I tell all my clients this, and I'm not, just because we do this every day and we understand it can be overwhelming. What I will say is, in my municipality, and I've got all of my certified generals each monitor and attend all of their own municipalities to get individual stats. 98.5% of the rejected, denied SI, SD applications where I live were owner builder submittals. Okay. And part of it is they didn't necessarily take the time and read, or they said, well, I'm going to hang the drywall, so I'm not going to put that labor cost in, right? So this is where using, unless you're in the trades, we are all, I pushing to get my family back in our home. Time is of the essence. This is where hiring a good professional is key. That is my recommendation.
Yeah, and so you brought up,
having a contractor definitely helps. And this is the other part that, this is just the reality of the process. There's that value component, the actual cash value component, and then there's what you're submitting for a permit. And what I'm trying to think of how I say this, your general contractor, when you're getting comfortable with your general contractor, they should have experience filling these forms out already. Again, this is not just a post-catastrophe event. This form is no different than what gets filled out every time you build in floodplain. So, part of that interviewing process should be, what have you done in my jurisdiction? It's really pertinent. So, and I get it, right now, everybody's drinking through a fire hose, including the municipalities, which is why a lot of the owner builder packets are being bounced on first review. Part of it is, my personal feeling is they're just being more heavily scrutinized because these people, they're not in the trades. So they review them, they kick the can, they've got another 28 days, 29 days, to put them back on the heap and keep going through, because they're all overwhelmed. I get it. I respect that part of it. But, again, my point is, don't wait to complete that packet, get your contractor. If you're going to do an appraisal, hire an appraiser. They can work in parallel. You can have your substantial improvement, substantial damage packet submitted with or without an appraisal before you get a substantial damage notice. There's one particular municipality I'm not going to call out here on the beaches in Pinellas County. They've stopped issuing substantial damage letters because the data was so flawed that they had to stop the process and they backpedaled it. But the problem with that is, for me, I've got clients who want to tear their house down, right? They've been through flooding. This is the 3rd event, let's say, and they're like, you know what, John, we're taking the house down. Now they want their substantial damage assessment because that opens up, it's not a lot, but it's like 10% of the cost to elevate your home. It's between 200, I'd say for a standard like 2,400 square foot house, we're probably looking at about $250,000 to $300,000 to raise RAISE, not RAZ, to raise your home before you actually build out under it and everything else. And if you look at a standard FEMA policy that's 250 up to 250, but there's a $30,000 ICC kicker that is for just that. So
every bit helps. Every bit helps
for sure. So that's just another little nuance of that process. But
yeah, that's very interesting. And so you know, if I could circle back on just a few things that I think I found interesting, and I know people in these locations will find interesting. So really, you know, focusing in on that, the paperwork that needs to be filed is going to control, right? Because you can't move forward without that substantial improvement, substantial damage estimate package. There's two things on that. There's going to be the ACV, which we're basing the potential 50% off, and I'm trying to do my hands here on one side. And then on the other side is how much work are you doing, right? So the wrong way to do it is just assume you're doing 50% or more of the work based on their mass valuation. Because, and for example, and correct if I'm wrong with some of these examples here, but let's say you've got really nice molding on the bottom of the floor, right? And that might cost you $30,000 throughout the house. What if you built it back more simply? Would that count against your substantial damage improvement or no?
Well, I mean, so again, to your point, it gets to a point where it is simple math. So your numerator is your cost.
And the numerator is the top line for those watching at home.
Yeah, your denominator is your actual cash value, and that's the simple math once they are approved. So we submit the county number that's on the books for depreciated value. I mean, that is the number, but you know, we haven't completed an appraisal that we didn't see an increase. I think we averaged.
That's what I would ask, just to simplify that number that they're, you know, using for the ad valorem taxes, and that is that generally going to be a little lower, much lower?
Averaging, I hate to use averages, but right now, which was at over 250 to 300 valuations that we've prepared, it's probably about 28 to 30% lower, which is significant. I mean, if you're in that 35, 40% category, and your concern is, there's a whole bunch of examples, but you just don't know when in construction of these older, these are, the majority they're all post World War II for I'd say 95% of the homes are post World War II. The majority are like Ruttenberg 1960, ranches. And that's just what we see consistently in increases. And we see some that are, we've seen 100% increase over what the county is carrying on books. And it happens. And a lot of that is depreciation and what's been upgraded or not been upgraded. I mean, if you have a house that's been owned by the same family for 35 years and you're not seeing a lot of recent permit activity, and we could tell based on effective age that they're carrying on the books. If I've got an effective age on a property that's like 60 years and they haven't picked up a single upgrade, we know we're going to see. We know exactly. We know we're going to see a very significant increase. Now, again, it's we're working off of what your property was the day before the storm. So, I talk to my clients and they're like, well, will you inspect? And we're like, yes, but I'm not going to be including my photos of your FEMA cut, because it's like, you've seen one FEMA cut, you've seen them all. What I need is I need data. I need imagery, video, still photo. I'll take marketing pics off of MLS. I'll take whatever I can get to show quality and condition prior to.
So John, to that point, let's talk. So let me see if I can kind of do a great summarization here too. And I loved your analogy. I don't know if analogy, but whatever, but it's simple division, right? It's math, right?
Yeah.
We've got a denominator. Denominator is going to be that ACV. Numerator is going to be the work you're intending to do. If I got that right, or yeah. So
it's what you pull and is approved for your permit.
So okay,
which should, in theory, get you back to where you were pre.
But there's, on both of those numbers, people are acting like the number that they receive for that value is stuck, and they act like
well, I'll give you that's a great point. It's like, hey, my insurance company's going to pay me $200,000, right? But my actual cash value is only 120, so I can only do $60,000 worth of work. Just an example. Well, I mean, the reality is, I went through this. If you've got a 16-foot opening, I've got a double slider on the back of my house. Here's an example. Your insurance company may pay out. They don't even have a 16-foot slider in their system.
Oh,
so they'll together when they're costing. And they're like, well, you can catch me on the backside because whatever you agree to, you have one more bite at the apple as you're getting close to closing out your permit. We can go there after. But the reality is your deal with your insurance company doesn't mean that you have to replace every item. Now, if you have another flood and you make another claim and then you go back and you say, okay, I'm replacing, I'm not, I haven't replaced it again, your insurance company isn't going to pay twice for it.
Correct.
But they can't force you to replace your sliding doors if they're still functioning, even though they got wet and your insurance company is paying you. And that's why payout numbers really don't have a bearing. So people are really freaked out and saying, my God, I'm going to submit a permit. My SISD application is a permit for $80,000 and I'm getting paid $180. I'm like, unfortunately, this is government. And I laugh. It's like, I'm a second generation appraiser. My father, who is now 90 and still active, not practicing, but still active and with us, laughs. He was the chief appraiser for HUD and FHA for the entire Northeast region of the United States. And, his simple adage is, ask 3 different people in the same government office the same question. You're going to get 3 answers. It's just, they don't know. And or they don't want to know, which is the funny part too. It's like my appraisals, the property appraiser they're not going to Mike Twitty, and Mike's not going to set up a whole nother division to start entering actual cash values. It has no bearing. And furthermore, for him, and to his credit, he's like, it's not going to impact your tax base and your tax burden anyway. For the most part, the majority of people are locked in with homestead.
Got it. And that's another big question too. And I want to get back to that first denominator, numerator, whatever. But real quick,
insurance thing that's more in your realm, which is we've got this whole let's get everybody back into their homes, right, and deal with the insurance company and deal with the permitting, and there's that process, and then it's January 23rd, and we've got people that are looking at their taxes, and then there's a whole other appraisal, tool for people, and this is more on the CPA side where there is catastrophic loss.
Yeah.
And how do you quantify that? And that's different than what we're talking about today. It's a completely different
the scope of this discussion.
Yeah. So it's a whole other conversation. I'm happy to touch on it, but I don't want to confuse it either.
Well, let me get back. So what we're talking about, and you dove back in really nicely there. We've got the numerator, the denominator. That's how you calculate a percentage. What we're talking about is generally 50% or maybe 49%, depending on municipality. We're talking about a percentage. So we have a numerator and denominator. If there's only one takeaway from this discussion for people out there in this situation, it's that you can move both of these numbers, right? You're not stuck. And those are your most powerful tools. And the way that you move them is knowing, here's the reality. Okay. So every municipality, when they're reviewing your permit, your SISD application, they have a set of numbers that's provided to them by ICC. And it's labor costs and material costs. Yep. So it's, $150 to hang a 4x8 sheet of drywall. I'm not saying that, what your general contractor is charging you isn't going to be what's on your permit application, but that's just the reality of the business. I mean, but you can't not ascribe a labor value for each component of your build back. But in the 25 years that I've been valuing and in all the FEMA appraisals that I've done, and even the post Ian example,
it's not like there's a FEMA quality control police that's going to come back and say, oh, no, you had dovetailed, cabinet drawers. And, so I mean, there is some wiggle room, which is why hiring an expert and a professional on the costing side, meaning the GC, is an extremely valuable tool, just as valuable as hiring a private appraiser like myself.
Because again, they're moving the top number, you're helping move that bottom number. And I think the biggest, and again, I'm sure you've seen this firsthand, but I think the biggest problem that we saw when people would reach out to us, or especially very early on, is they're like, what do I start doing right now? Like, oh my gosh. And just this tremendous fear and uncertainty. And
start reviewing GCs and know what your numbers are that your starting point is. Don't wait for a substantial damage letter. Hire a GC that you like, and when you come to terms with your GC, because there may be terms in there that say, okay, owner's going to provide the tile because it's $19 a foot, whatever that looks like. Once you're comfortable with your contractor and your contract with your contractor, ask him to fill out the substantial improvement, substantial damage packet, because that's part of his work. And that takes more of the unknown apart, because not only do you know what you're going to be stroking checks for, quite candidly, you're going to know what your contractor is comfortable submitting for a substantial improvement, substantial damage permit application.
Got it. And then you can take that number and you could do a little quick math and say, am I near 50%?
Compared to the company number before you, and that's what I look at. Exactly. And then you can say, I don't want somebody to hire me. I'd rather you save it. I mean, and I laugh. It's like,
no, listen. But John, I think your approach is a fair and a smart approach, right? It's like, if you need me, we'll provide the service. I say the same thing to my clients. Hey, if you're already happy, you don't need a lawyer. Why would you need a lawyer if you got what you need? But what you're saying, so if we get that number and then we do a back of the math calculation, or maybe I got that number from the county, or I go to my property appraiser and I figure it out from there. What's 50% about from them? If I'm in no jeopardy of that, I can be confident and move forward.
Yes, submit the packet without the private appraisal, get it in the queue and start the process, because then you can start pushing and monitoring the process.
Got it. And now if it's close, I may say, I want to make sure I need to hire someone like John because I don't want to mess with it. Certainly if you're over that 50% by a decent margin, then it's something. Let's have a conversation with John. And then we also probably need to go back and talk to the GC and work it out. So that's, to me, I'm a very process oriented guy. And that's what I would do if I were in that position. I'd say, like your advice, start with your GC, see what you need to do, see what you want to do. Compare that to what your estimate of that 50% is, knowing that you can move that number if you need to by hiring a team like John.
Give yourself a little cushion. Don't create anxiety, because we've all been there. I mean, I had gut renovated the house that you saw devastated. We had gut renovated the ground floor in 2022.
Wow.
And when we got into it, all the cast iron piping, we couldn't reconnect to this. We ended up die cutting the floors and ripping out all the sewer systems. So don't come right up to, I've had clients say, well, we're about $480 off of 50%. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't chance it.
Yes.
Because the reality is, yes, you've got your packet. It still has to go through permit review. So there could still be a request for changes that may rub you up against 49 or 50%.
There's a time value component, right?
That's exactly it.
What if you get all the way here and you get kicked back?
That's correct. You can still come back after the fact, but that may be another 30 days of working its way through the snake. And is it worth it? The other thing is, I've got, back to the clients that are thinking of raising the home. I've got clients, we run a brokerage. I've got clients who want to market the property. Well, they don't want to market the property if somebody's going to come and basically hold their feet to the fire for what's on the county record that they know is low. So from a marketing perspective, if they've got, there's a lot of, vulture opportunistic funds out there right now, they would rather keep all of their options open. So there's that. And then even if you intend to either sell or, repair, there's a timeline, but once you do get a substantial damage letter stating that you're substantially damaged or not, but indicating that basically they know you got wet and there was a loss, you have 60 days to file your substantial improvement, substantial damage packet. And if you then don't meet the 50 or 49% threshold, you're not billable. So, that's the scary part and the unfortunate part of what's been done 2.0 in our market here post Ian is that they've taken a different approach to labeling substantial damage and how they go about it. And what that does is it's automatically putting a lot of people that probably shouldn't have been placed in an appeal posture right out of the gate, which that elevates the anxiety.
Yeah.
So that would be my takeaway is, what we're going to try and do better is maybe you just send a letter out to everybody that you know took on water as you get that information from NFIP and FEMA, but don't label them substantially damaged. Tell them they have to come in. Tell them they have to come in with their substantial improvement, substantial damage packet and or additional data, which would be a private appraisal or not, but don't tell them they're substantially damaged and it's 58% when it's based on flawed data.
And that's
on the flawed side and on the value side. And that's the rub right now. And that's why there's so many people that are up in arms right now about that substantial damage letter and that process.
Yep. Well, we plan to distribute this far and wide. I mean, what you just said there was the number one stress factor for everyone, right? Because they don't have context to understand this process. They don't have the context to understand that they can change both the numerator and the denominator of that substantial percentage. They have options. They just got a letter that told them they were in violation. And that is scary when it's your home and you know that.
Especially if you've been waiting for it because you were paralyzed and you didn't know what to do. Now we're saying, don't wait, don't work. That's why I'm saying don't work in linear fashion. There's a whole bunch of things that you can be doing because to sit back, at least if you say, I know I'm not substantially damaged. Here's the data.
Yep.
Right. It's a lot better than sitting and waiting for a letter and then hearing what you don't want to hear based on data that's not really solid.
That makes a lot of sense. And we see it in our property damage practice too, where someone will be denied and they'll say, well, I'm denied. And I'll say, well, that was one adjuster who spent 5 minutes at your properties. Like he didn't get the right data. Let's get the right data. And then
the numerator that they're using for the substantial damage letters, these people have not been in your house. And the denominator, our county property appraisers are saying, we know that we haven't been in your house in decades. So if that's the basis of the substantial damage, don't wait.
Yeah.
Get ahead of the curve. Yeah.
I think your suggestion that how to improve this, for when you talk to any government officials, municipal leaders, and likewise for me, I think that's the number one thing is this became immediately where people thought they were victimized by FEMA or by their government was telling them they have to tear down their house. And it's like, whoa, no, this is actually the start of the process was like quick draw McGraw where they're like, you need to tear down your house. Like that wasn't even nearly true. We actually don't even have the right information to know if that's true or not. So to me, it's absolutely crazy to start that process, to start these homeowners under the gun.
There's a whole other wave right now. So now as it works its way through the snake, I started to give you stats on how many permits have been issued. So the St. Pete example, they've been doing, I would say that they've been doing a dynamite job at 5,200 permits issued, but they're not even halfway through the number of permits they anticipate are required based on who's been impacted. I believe the estimate was around 12,000 or 13,000 permits that they're going to have to process. The interesting part with some of these other municipalities and unincorporated, areas are that because they're not staffed up to handle what they deal with during sunshine, they are not staffed up for what we have now. And the private appraisal piece is just starting to work its way through the process. So now we've got, because, it's not licensed, certified general appraisers, as an example, reviewing these things, they farm this stuff out again to Tidal Basin, which is a for-profit private company. And they're kicking back, some of the reviews and only in one municipality are beyond broad, and they are continuing to rely on and say, well, the input information in the costing model doesn't match what the county has on record. And we're like, well, that's the whole point.
Of course, yeah, that's what we're doing here.
And the review will come with two initials, nobody's signing, and the reviewer is not responding directly to the licensed professional. Now we are certifying our report to the property owner, to the municipality, to the building officials, and to the floodplain administrator. They have reliance language, yet they are choosing not to come back to us. So now we've got homeowners that have been bounced on 2 reviews where we know we're absolutely found. And now I've worked with, whether it's the top of the top head of the county property appraiser or the head lead building official, to have to lean in and say, guys, the process is flawed. So the problem is you've got homeowners, property owners, whether it's commercial or residential, and in that piece of the process, there's no recourse.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. So we're working that out. That's one of those, I talk about retrospective. What did we learn? What are we dealing with today? I've got open dialogue, and I'm working with, whether it's, our, Kathleen Peters, or, whether it's our political figures, whether it's our elected officials, our building officials, our property appraisers, to better that process. Because there's still some hurdles and hiccups. I don't want to say, you've got the numerator and the denominator. What you need to understand is your GC may have a little back and forth, educating the permit tech who's never dealt with this before. And your appraiser, may be going toe to toe to educate floodplain administrators, the staff that's been hired to handle this. But, we'll get you there. You just have to understand it's a process, and it hasn't been gone through before either.
Yeah, and that's interesting. And we see, of course, the same thing. We handle a lot of disputed claims, and when there's not accountability for people not doing their jobs or delaying, oftentimes we'll have an insurance company say, "Oh yeah, here's your money," and we're like, "Yeah, you're 2 years late, man," and there's no accountability. The laws have changed such that there's no extra there's no real punishment for them. So why they're not incentivized to do right, and they're not incentivized to make it right. So in terms, obviously in our discussions, anything we can do to help move this forward, let's do that. But I think what you just touched on is a great segue for people watching out there. John, if they call your office, how does this process work?
It's really simple. They're going to get me. So there's a simple onboarding by my staff for basic information, and then they tee everything up for me. So we have all the county records, permit records. I have their FEMA letter from the county property appraiser, and I'll literally set up a time and personally speak with every single client that we onboard and walk them through the process as it relates specifically to their property, their municipality, and their situation, whether they are insured or self-insured, whether they have a mortgage or not, and I'll walk them through the entire process. And then from there, honestly, we're about 9 business days out and putting out a dynamite product. We've gotten great feedback, even from third-party review. So I'm really proud of what we're putting out there. So.
And that's great, John. I love that. The timeline's great. The service is great. People are talking to you, the MAI himself. So, but in this process, what is it your team is doing? You're going to, and again, I'll give maybe the very basics, but you're going to go locate old photos or whatever, and then document values.
Yeah. So what we'll do is we actually set up a dedicated encrypted portal for every single property owner for their property to make it easy so they can just drag and drop. Because I've got clients that come in with photos because they don't have a computer, and my staff will scan their imagery for them and send it back to them. We set up a dedicated encrypted portal because people's email accounts can't handle sending more than like 5 photos at a time. So we do what we can to streamline that process, and we're utilizing the same like segregated detailed costing software that's being used on the other end for substantial damage. We're also using physical life calculators that are being used, and we've also taken all the same courses that the floodplain administrators have taken. The nuance to that, I don't want to get into weeds, is they are trying to mandate the use of just one physical life calculator method. And it was taken from a course by one of my counterparts, another MAI, but it is not the only way to estimate depreciation. We do utilize it, but it's not the only tool in our toolbox. And I just had a great conversation with my MAI counterpart in the Pinellas County Property Appraiser's office, who's like totally gets it. He's like, you're 100% right. We've been pushing back on floodplain administrators to say this isn't gospel. Yeah. And the reality is, if a third party vendor that's reviewing appraisals is going to say, well, we're relying on the information that's fed into the county, the system's broken, because they're hiring us for our expertise because we're looking beyond what is dated and in the system. And it's the dated information that's in the system that's been freaking everybody out to begin with, because it's flawed. So it's like this whole
it goes circular. Yeah.
It's working its way out. There's enough people in high places that see what needs to be tweaked. I think our municipalities, for the most part, are doing a great job. So, the way that I see it is, keep doing the right thing and be a part of the solution, which is why we're having this conversation right now. And the more information that we put out there and tools that we put out there in the community and act consistently, the better for everybody.
No, that's terrific, John. And we'll kind of use that as a closing note, because I think you encapsulated it very well. And, let me say on a personal level, I appreciate all the hard work you do. You've been very responsive, very available. You're in the community, you're living it, my man. We appreciate it. And guys, with your background, there's not a ton of them out there. So appreciate
I appreciate you with the forum. It's people need access to information right now. It's a scary time for people. So honestly, if there's anybody out there that has any questions about the process, pick up the phone and call me. My website is PropVal, www.propval, PROP is in property, VAL is in value.com. And you can find me through that. Feel free to call my cell phone. Dan, if you want to share the little slides that I put, I've got my direct contact on there as well.
Cool.
But I'm happy to help any way that I can.
No, that's terrific. And, it doesn't go unnoticed, all the good hard work you're doing there. So that's awesome. And, that's why I always appreciate it. Give people a chance to say, hey, how do we contact you? Let me just touch on one more thing. Is there any cost for people to reach out if they have questions?
No, not at all. Absolutely not.
Call the guy.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So, John, appreciate it again. I'm going to be sharing all your information. Obviously here, we'll do some reposting, some clips and stuff, some valuable stuff. Again, it's all about getting good information out to the people who need it. So on behalf of, not me, on behalf of the people who are going to get the value from this, we very much appreciate your time and all the hard work you do in the community. So thank you, John.
Thank you for the opportunity. You guys be safe. Let me know if I can help.
Pleasure. All right. Awesome. So John is the absolute man, and what an accomplished guy. And, obviously we hate that he had to go through this, but the fact that he's in this community and he's gone through and is going through these processes with everyone out there, I think makes him a very special advocate for the community. So, I'll do my little summary like I love to do here. The biggest thing is when this, this tragic flood, again, some people were hit by both Helene and Milton floodwaters, but when this hit, these municipalities started sending these substantial damage determination letters saying you've been determined that you have over 50%. Well, the important thing to know is that was probably a little misnomer. You have not been determined. That was an initial determination that you're probably at risk of that. And maybe going forward, they'll do a better job with that communication. That would be my hope. And with people like John working on it, I'm sure we'll get there. But what I would talk about if someone asked me going forward, really after this conversation, and John's been very generous with his time with us, and I've learned a ton going through these conversations. But the important thing to realize is the 50%, I haven't done this kind of math in years. There's a lot of lawyer jokes out there as it relates to only knowing percentages, but whatever. But the important thing to realize is it's a fraction problem, right? That's how we get a percentage. You've got the numerator up top, the denominator below, and you're dividing one by the other to calculate 50% above or below. So now that we're empowered with the knowledge to know that we can change not only this number through John and his team, but also this number through a knowledgeable, local, licensed general contractor, ideally who has some frame of reference and background working in your municipality, this is starting to unravel, starting to get a lot less scary. And so I'm going to end on that note, because that was kind of the whole purpose here. I have dear friends of mine who are lawyers in these communities who were sitting in the same seat as people who don't have that kind of educational background, and everyone was frightened. Everyone's talking about these letters they're getting. So my goal was to, as usual, empower you with knowledge, hopefully ask the right questions. If you have any other questions, any follow-ups, you know where to reach us on all our social platforms. I'm very happy to share time, as I always have been, and also connect you with John and other resources like John, people who can really help you out in your time of need. So thank you for joining us. I hope that we're able to help you, and stay safe out there. Cheers.